In just 13 seconds, Jasmine Crockett dismantled an empire. The room, packed with lawmakers, aides, and press, froze. President Donald Trump, watching from a live stream in the West Wing, exploded in fury as Crockett connected the final dot. A hidden mansion, buried in the Austrian countryside, linked directly to his son. $13 million, meant for wounded veterans, redirected into marble floors, gold fixtures, and private helipads. The president's face drained of color, then flushed with rage. How did she find out? Who betrayed them? And more importantly, what would happen now? What started as another long, procedural day inside the Capitol building turned into a political earthquake. How did Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett uncover a secret estate across the Atlantic, funded with stolen money and hidden under layers of shell companies? And what does it mean for the Trump legacy? The story begins, not with a confrontation, but with a paper cut. Crockett slid the thick file across her desk. "This doesn't add up," she muttered. Her staffer, Marcus, leaned over her shoulder. "Veteran Affairs, right?" She nodded, tapping the redacted page. "Why is there a $13 million gap in a fund that was already allocated? And why is this wire transfer going to a consulting firm based in Vienna?" "What do you want to do?" he asked. She looked up, already resolved. "We subpoena every name on this list." 3 weeks later, Room B in the Oversight Committee was full. The usual hum of conversations, the clicking of pens, the shifting of paper. Routine. Until Crockett walked in, she did not speak right away. Instead, she handed a flash drive to the technician. A large screen flickered behind her. She placed a small stack of documents on the desk and adjusted the microphone. "Before I begin," she said calmly, "I want to remind every witness under oath that lying to Congress is a federal offense." A low murmur went through the chamber. One of the men seated at the far end stiffened. His name was Howard Lehman, former senior accountant at a defense contracting firm. His hands fidgeted under the table. Crockett continued. "This committee was given full access to the Veteran Recovery Allocation Fund, $13 million, earmarked for critical support programs. According to these records, that money disappeared less than 6 months after being approved." She held up a letter. "This is from the Department of Veteran Services, dated February 4th. It is a rejection letter for Sergeant Wallace Denby, paralyzed from the waist down after serving in Fallujah. He applied for medical mobility support. He was denied. Reason given, funds depleted." She paused. "Now let's play a clip." The screen lit up. A hidden camera video. Time-stamped, grainy, inside a conference room. Lehman was visible, speaking to a woman whose face was blurred. "Just reroute the invoice through Monarch Europe. They'll handle the transfer. No questions asked." The chamber shifted. The energy turned. Crockett did not break eye contact with Lehman. "Do you recognize your voice, Mr. Lehman?" He hesitated. "That was taken without my consent." "That is not an answer," she said. He swallowed. "Yes. Do you understand that Monarch Europe is listed in real estate ownership records for a 17,000 square foot property registered under the alias Alexander Barris?" A ripple went through the chamber. Crockett lifted a page from her folder. "Alexander Barris, a known alias used in at least 3 off-book transactions by none other than Baron William Trump." Gasps. Audible. Undeniable. She turned to the second witness, Maria Ellis, former financial controller. Her eyes darted back and forth, then landed on the documents. "I didn't know the full scope," Ellis whispered. "They told me it was a transfer for legal consulting. It didn't seem right." "Did you ask questions?" Crockett asked. "I was told to keep my mouth shut or I'd be blacklisted." "Did you know it was veteran money?" Ellis nodded slowly, a tear forming. "Not until later." Crockett set the folder down. "This is not just about one transaction or one mansion. This is about a betrayal. A betrayal so deep that it erodes the very idea of who we claim to be as a country. $13 million. That is not just a number. That is medicine. That is therapy. That is prosthetics. That is dignity." She turned toward the press gallery, knowing the clip would play nationwide by evening. "Before we hear our next witness, I want to say this clearly. No one is above the law. Not a sitting president, not his family, not those who enable them." The room was silent now. Not a cough, not a whisper. Just the click of a pen somewhere in the back and the distant sound of cameras recording. A side door opened. Jerry Peters stepped inside. He looked older than 50, heavy eyes, a gray flannel shirt tucked into pressed jeans. In his hand, he clutched a photo. It was his son. Crockett stood as he approached. "Mr. Peters, thank you for coming." He nodded and sat, adjusting the microphone nervously. "Please tell the committee your experience." His voice cracked. "My son, Danny, served 2 tours, came home missing a leg. We applied for housing modification, ramps, widened doorways, got denied. They said there wasn't funding, said he'd have to wait." He placed the photo down. "Danny died in June, suicide. He felt like a burden. He thought we were better off without him." Several in the chamber looked down. Some wiped their eyes. Crockett reached forward and placed a hand over his. "I am so sorry," she said. "You deserved better. He deserved better." Jerry nodded slowly. "Then make it mean something." Crockett turned back to the room. Her voice was louder now, sharper. "We have real names, we have real evidence, and we have a real family living in a foreign palace built on the backs of those who served." She pointed to the screen again. A new image appeared. A villa, white stone, surrounded by high walls and armed security. A banner underneath read, "Registered Trust, Barris Family Holdings." Then she said the line that would become a headline across the country. "You do not get to pretend to love the troops and rob them blind at the same time." Outside the chamber, protesters began to gather. Inside, Jasmine Crockett had only just begun. Reporters swarmed the Capitol steps as word spread. Jasmine Crockett had not only exposed a hidden fortune, she had implicated the president's family with irrefutable documentation. By nightfall, every major news network was looping the clip of Jerry Peters and that final line. "You do not get to pretend to love the troops and rob them blind at the same time." Inside the committee room, the air was different now. Still, heavy, but charged. Crockett knew the backlash was coming. She expected it. But she also knew that she was holding something even stronger than outrage. She had truth, and it was about to get harder to ignore. Representative Connors, a senior member from across the aisle, leaned into his microphone. "Congresswoman Crockett, you are alleging serious criminal fraud, possibly treasonous misuse of federal funds. Do you have further evidence that connects this property directly to the president's family?" Crockett did not blink. "I do." She opened a black binder. Inside was a printed email. She read aloud. "From Bryant T. at barristrust.u. Subject: Interior specs confirmed. To TRB, Exdir at penselegacy.org. Dated December 12, 2023. Quote, Young Barron confirmed he will spend the summer on site. Privacy must be airtight. Father expects all bills routed through advisory firm." She held it up for the cameras. This email was obtained legally via a whistleblower who provided verified access to internal servers. You can see clearly references to the trust, the president, and the summer estate. $13 million traced through 3 accounts, all of which passed through a fund meant to serve injured veterans. Representative Connors was silent. Crockett continued, "I would now like to introduce into the record sworn testimony from a former Department of Veterans Services official who chose to remain anonymous for safety. The testimony confirms that he was ordered to deny all high-cost medical housing requests for a 3-month period due to, quote, strategic reallocations, end quote." She glanced toward the back row. Staffers were shifting uneasily. Phones were going off. The story was out, but the implications were still unraveling. That is when she dropped the next piece. "Committee members," she said, "I ask you now to turn to tab 5 in your folders. There you will find an invoice. It is dated April 3, 2024. It was submitted through Monarch Europe under the authorization of a shell account known as Helix Haven. That invoice was for imported Italian marble. Destination: a property outside Salzburg." She waited a beat. "Now cross-reference that with the image behind me." A high-resolution photograph filled the screen. The same villa from earlier, but now clearly captured by a drone. The exterior walls gleamed with new marble trim. A fountain, shaped like an American eagle, stood in the courtyard. "Do you know what that marble cost?" she asked the room. $1.2 million. Gasps. Again. "That is enough to cover full prosthetic limb replacement for more than 200 wounded soldiers." She turned to the witness table. "Mr. Lehman, do you recall signing off on this invoice?" His voice was hoarse now. "I didn't know what it was for." "But you authorized the transfer?" "Yes." Crockett stepped forward. Her voice sharpened again, but it did not rise. She did not yell. She did not need to. Mr. Lehman, what did you think was going to happen when you moved millions of dollars from a public trust fund into a foreign real estate firm? He looked down. I was told not to ask questions. By whom? He paused. By someone in the Trump organization. The room jolted. Crockett leaned in. Name? A long silence. He spoke. Eric Trump. The chamber erupted. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters bolted from the gallery. Phones buzzed. This was no longer just about Barron Trump's summer villa. This was about an entire operation. Chairman Walters slammed the gavel. Order! Order! Crockett did not move. I ask that we immediately issue a subpoena for Eric Trump to testify before this committee. The chairman stared at her. On what grounds? On the grounds that he participated in the misdirection of $13 million of federal aid meant for injured soldiers, and that he funneled it through a series of shadow firms to bankroll international luxury real estate holdings for personal benefit. Silence. Subpoena approved, the chairman finally said. By the end of the day, helicopters were circling over Mar-a-Lago. Protesters were banging on the gates. Candlelight vigils for fallen soldiers were held on the Capitol steps. But the most dramatic moment of the evening was broadcast live. President Donald Trump, seated in the Oval Office, red-faced, speaking to a Fox News anchor. It's a hoax, he said. This is just another witch hunt from the radical left. That woman, Crockett, she's a disgrace. She's lying. My son doesn't even like Europe. But even his supporters noticed something. He kept glancing off camera. His hands trembled. He knew the tide was turning. And in a quiet office on the 5th floor of a government building, Jasmine Crockett was watching too. Not to gloat, not to savor, but to plan her next move. She picked up the phone. Marcus, we need to bring in forensic audit teams. Every transfer from the past 4 years. Start with Project Valor. You think it's deeper? I know it is, she said. The next morning, Crockett walked back into the hearing room. Her notes were precise. Her hair was tied back. No distractions. No deviation. The crowd had doubled. Even members of the public lined the hallway. She opened the hearing with one line. There is no more pretending. This is not politics. This is theft. And we are going to expose every last part of it. A new document slid onto the table. Foreign bank records. Transfers from Cayman-based entities into the same Vienna accounts. And then came the footage that no one expected. A private security camera leak. A black SUV arriving at the Austrian villa. The door opened. Barron Trump stepped out. Tall. Smiling. Wearing a designer suit. He was greeted by a man holding a clipboard. Welcome home, Mr. Barris. The name Barris was supposed to be a firewall, a false identity buried under trusts, signed documents, and silent couriers. But the footage was clear. The audio was cleaner. And the face was unmistakable. Barron Trump. Or rather, Alexander Barris, as the villa's property records listed him. Jasmine Crockett did not smile as the video ended. She did not gloat. She simply turned the monitor off and leaned into the microphone. There is no longer any question about identity, about connection, about intent. Across the table, Representative Connors, who had tried to remain neutral until now, cleared his throat. Congresswoman, I have to ask, are you suggesting that Barron Trump knowingly received funds that were originally meant for wounded service members? I'm not suggesting, Crockett replied. I'm showing. She raised another folder. This, she said, is a signed maintenance agreement. It was submitted on May 12th to a firm called House Culture Management in Vienna. That agreement includes monthly landscaping and round-the-clock private security, services billed to the Barris Trust, services paid using a funding stream that can be directly traced back to the Department of Veterans Services Relief Reserve. Connors leaned back, silent. Then Crockett did what no one expected. She stood up. She motioned for someone at the back. A young woman walked in, late 20s, crisp white shirt, no makeup, hair pulled back. She looked like she did not sleep. Her name was Emily Cho, and she had been a junior accountant at the firm that moved the funds through Monarch Europe. She raised her right hand, took the oath, and sat down. I was 25 when I started, she said, voice steady but soft. I didn't know what I was looking at first, but then I saw it. The exact names, the codes, the project identifiers. Which codes? Crockett asked. Project Valor, Project Dignity, Operation Back Home. All of them had line items siphoned out before the money ever made it to the VA's internal processing. Crockett nodded. How much? In total? At least 40 million, maybe more. A gasp. Someone in the back swore under their breath. Emily continued. I tried to speak up. I brought it to my supervisor. He told me, quote, don't ruin your career over something you don't understand. And what did you do then? Crockett asked. Emily's voice shook now. I copied everything. Every ledger, every payment code, every email. I stored it on a flash drive. I waited. And when I saw the clip of Jerry Peters on the news, I knew it was time. Crockett held up the flash drive. This, ladies and gentlemen, is going to change everything. And it did. Within 48 hours, that drive was reviewed by a bipartisan forensic team. The results confirmed what Crockett feared. Project Valor had been used as a funnel, not just for the Austrian villa, but for luxury condos in Dubai, private jet rentals, and obscure property holdings in Belize. All connected, all funded from one place, veteran aid. The president's press team scrambled. Statements were issued, then retracted, then rewritten again. Barron Trump had not appeared publicly, but the photos of him stepping out of that SUV were now on every front page from New York to Los Angeles. The public reaction was immediate. Veterans protested outside the White House. Crowds gathered at military hospitals, holding up signs that read "Dignity for sale" and "This was our money." Crockett, meanwhile, stayed focused. Inside the committee room, she laid out the next phase. This hearing is no longer just about exposure, it is about restitution. We are moving toward criminal referral, and I want to make it clear, everyone who touched this pipeline will be named. She motioned toward the screen again. Another clip. This time, it was from a private dinner, recorded by a hidden body mic worn by an unnamed executive who turned state witness. A voice, crisp and unmistakable. We can route another 3 million through Helix Haven. My son's suite still needs furnishing. Vienna's been colder than expected. The voice was Donald Trump. Crockett turned to the committee. This is not a mistake. This is theft. It is systemic. It is generational. It is protected by money, silence, and fear. Representative Connors looked stunned. Chairman Walters just stared down at the transcript. Jasmine Crockett continued. America is watching. Our veterans are watching. And they are not looking for slogans. They are looking for justice. Outside, the crowd had grown to thousands. Inside, every line of testimony was being live-streamed to millions. Emily Cho remained seated at the witness table. She looked toward Crockett. I want to thank you, she said, almost in a whisper. If it weren't for you, this would still be buried. Crockett gave a small nod. Truth has a way of surfacing. You just have to be willing to carry it through the noise. The next morning, a federal judge issued a protective order for Emily. Then came the warrant requests. By mid-afternoon, multiple Trump-affiliated shell firms were frozen. That evening, the story reached a boiling point when Jerry Peters was invited to speak on national television. He held his son's photo and spoke directly to the camera. We don't want revenge. We want honesty. We want our leaders to remember that a soldier's life should never be traded for granite floors and gold door handles. That line made the evening news, every late show, and eventually, Crockett's own desk. She watched the clip, silent, her staff around her not saying a word. Then, without looking up, she said, Tomorrow, we bring in the department heads, we find out who signed off, and we make it clear, silence is complicity. As the sun set on Washington, D.C., Jasmine Crockett was not finished. Not by a long shot. The following morning, the line outside the Capitol was 3 blocks long. Veterans in wheelchairs, mothers carrying folded flags, reporters elbowing for space. Something rare was happening inside those walls. Accountability was taking shape in real time. Crockett walked into the chamber alone. No entourage, no speeches, just a black binder tucked under her arm and the same sharp focus that had brought her this far. Inside, 2 high-ranking officials from the Department of Veterans Services were already seated. Undersecretary Paul Greer and Program Director Melinda Hawthorne. Both had served under the last 3 administrations. Both were under subpoena. Crockett opened the hearing with no preamble. Director Hawthorne, you've overseen budget allocation for nearly 6 years, correct? Yes. Can you explain why your department approved the reclassification of Project Valor expenditures under discretionary consulting, despite the program being marked as protected funding? Melinda adjusted her glasses, her face pale. I I was instructed to follow a set of routing codes that were pre-cleared by the oversight board. We were told it was part of a larger reorganization. Crockett didn't flinch. Who told you that? Deputy Director Sanders. And above him, a memo was signed by someone in the Executive Budget Office. She slid a paper across the table. Is this the memo? Melinda looked at it, nodded. Yes, that's it. Would you mind reading who authorized it? Melinda swallowed. E. Trump. A murmur swept the room. Crockett held up her hand. No need for speculation. That's Eric Trump, whose signature also appears on 3 other transfer documents now linked to Barron's holdings. And I'll remind everyone, these aren't golf club memberships. These are housing funds, prosthetic clinics, trauma support programs. Crockett turned to Paul Greer. Mr. Greer, your name appears on a separate document dated January 3rd. You approved the budget sweep for Operation Back Home. That program was created for the purpose of reintegrating paralyzed veterans into civilian housing. It had already been vetted, already funded. Why did you sweep it? Greer shifted in his chair. The request came from the Office of Strategic Initiatives. We were told it was a temporary reallocation to support Homeland Security infrastructure. Did you confirm it? We were discouraged from doing so. Crockett's voice cut the room like a scalpel. Discouraged? By whom? Greer paused, then said the name clearly. Stephen Miller. The cameras inside the hearing room zoomed in, catching every expression. Some staffers looked stunned. Others didn't move at all. Crockett pressed forward. And are you aware that this temporary reallocation paid for 3 luxury vehicles currently parked outside the Austrian villa belonging to Baron Trump? No. Do you still claim that this was a security initiative? Greer looked down. No, ma'am. She stepped back from the microphone and flipped her binder shut. This is no longer just about betrayal. This is now about conspiracy. Behind her, the screen lit up again. A chart, names, timelines, account numbers, everything connected, from initial allocations through foreign transfers, shell firms, and final beneficiaries. One line stood out, $13 million. Project Valor, final deposit, Barris Trust. By now, the public had turned this scandal into a national reckoning. Online forums exploded with testimonies from veterans. Some spoke of being denied benefits. Others had lost homes while waiting for appeal decisions. All of them were asking one question. How long has this been going on? And Jasmine Crockett had the beginnings of an answer. After a brief recess, she returned with her next witness, a tech analyst named Marisol Varga. Her specialty, digital payment tracing. Ms. Varga, Crockett said, you've reviewed the flash drive submitted by Emily Cho? Yes. And your findings? Marisol leaned forward. I was able to trace every single routing number, over 4 dozen redirections, some lasting under 90 seconds. This was not casual fraud. This was engineered, obfuscated with intention. And the tools used encrypted relay servers, offshore IP masks, time-triggered fail-safes. This is national security-grade laundering. Do any of these methods suggest government involvement? Yes. The kind of access needed to pass unnoticed through multiple federal systems without triggering alerts is not available to civilians. The implication hit the room hard. This isn't just theft, Crockett said. This is infrastructure-level corruption. Outside the Capitol, veterans camped out overnight. They were not protesting anymore. They were standing vigil, not because they wanted justice, but because, for the first time in years, they believed they might get it. Inside, Jasmine Crockett stayed late, alone. She opened a small envelope Jerry Peters had handed her quietly, without saying a word. Inside was a letter Danny had written before his death. It read, I did what I was asked. I served. I fought. I came back broken. But I didn't expect to be forgotten. Crockett, if you're reading this, I hope you don't stop. Not until they know we mattered. She closed the letter slowly. And then she called her aide. Marcus, tomorrow we start declassification proceedings. I want full access to the internal Trump family communications from the last 5 years. No redactions. You think we'll get it? We'll make it impossible not to. The sun had not yet risen over Washington when Jasmine Crockett walked into her office, binder in hand, coffee untouched. She had not slept, neither had most of her staff, but the Capitol never felt more awake. The letter from Danny Peters was still folded in her pocket. Marcus, she said, stepping into the hallway, has the request been filed? Yes, he replied. We submitted the petition to the National Archive Office at 5:37 this morning. Classified communications, private correspondence, internal memos. Every email, every text, every call log linked to Trump family operations during the last 5 years. And their response? They're stalling, citing executive privilege. Crockett stopped walking. Then we challenge it. They'll fight. She looked at him without blinking. So will I. An hour later, the hearing resumed standing room only. Former White House Chief Legal Officer Brant Halverson had been subpoenaed to testify. A lawyer with decades of political insulation, Halverson had helped design many of the shell protections now unraveling. He sat stiffly, expression unreadable. Crockett did not offer pleasantries. Mr. Halverson, we've reviewed more than 500 emails bearing your signature. These documents include instructions for constructing layered legal barriers around a property in Austria registered under the alias Alexander Barris. Do you deny this? Halverson leaned in slightly. My office advises on estate management for high-profile families. We do not monitor how assets are acquired. You advised on 3 transactions directly involving funds routed through Monarch Europe. Each one aligned with dates on which Department of Veteran Services funding was moved out of critical assistance programs. Coincidence? I wouldn't know. Crockett stepped forward, holding a printed email. Allow me to help you remember. This email, sent by you on October 2nd, reads, Ensure asset integrity remains insulated from U.S. budget line visibility. Recommend a blend of foreign invoicing and personal trust shielding. Barron's side suite and pool extension should not reflect stateside connections. Halverson shifted for the first time. Do you stand by this? He stayed silent. She asked again, Do you stand by this? I was doing my job, he said finally. And your job, she replied coldly, was helping powerful men steal from broken soldiers. She turned away. We're done here. Halverson did not speak again. The room was silent as she brought up the next document, a calendar. Committee members, what you're looking at is a schedule. A private itinerary retrieved from encrypted Trump Organization servers. This includes the exact dates on which Barron Trump stayed at the Austrian estate and the payments authorized within 72 hours of each arrival. She pointed to a specific week, July of the previous year. That same week, the Veteran Housing Appeals Board rejected over 200 cases for urgent medical support. Why? The ledger said. Unavailable funding. But that was not true. She pulled up a video. Surveillance footage. An interior shot of the villa's dining hall. Barron Trump seated at the head of a 30-foot table. Dozens of candles. White linen. The audio came from a lapel mic, hidden by an ex-employee. So we got the new flooring, a voice said. Barron's voice replied. Dad said to add the marble staircase next. He doesn't care what it costs. Just make sure it's clean. No connection to DC money. Crockett froze the frame. Connection to DC money. That was the phrase. Everything in the chamber froze too. Young man or not, she said, he was not unaware. He was not ignorant. He was not innocent. By now, public pressure had cracked the silence in the White House. President Trump, who had spent the past week on defense, issued a brief, furious video message. Jasmine Crockett is lying. She's taking my family out of context. This is political theater, folks. All of it. My son is being dragged into something he knows nothing about. We love our veterans. Always have. But even that statement had been fact-checked before the hour ended. A receipt surfaced. February 17th, a 94, zero payment from Barris Trust to a Swiss interior design firm for a gold-plated personal elevator. The memo line read, Final installment for summer renovations Trump suite. Crockett did not respond to the president's message. She did not need to. The documents spoke for themselves. That afternoon, Emily Cho returned with an update. She had traced a previously unseen wire path from a firm called Apex Liberty, once used to fund a now-defunct military rehab center in Nevada. Except now, Apex Liberty's address was registered to a golf resort in Croatia, owned, quietly, by a holding firm connected to Eric Trump. The theft was not isolated, it was coordinated, and deeper than anyone had realized. Crockett prepared a new chart. It showed a spiderweb, veteran funds at the center, and 15 distinct shells surrounding it, each one tied to a Trump family member or business executive. Her closing statement for the day was short. Every penny they took had a name on it, a face, a story. Every penny meant something to someone. They didn't just rob the treasury. They robbed people's futures. The hearing adjourned, but the city did not rest. That night, Jerry Peters sat in his car outside the Capitol, watching the replay on his phone. He stared at the moment where Crockett read Danny's letter. He had heard it before. He had lived it. But seeing it read aloud on the record, in front of the world, it hit different. "I told him he mattered," Jerry whispered. "I just never knew how much." Back inside the building, Crockett sat with the flash drive again. This time, she focused on one detail she had overlooked. A payment dated Christmas Eve, $11,000, disguised as holiday gratuity for facility staff, routed from the Barron Trust to a service provider called Amber Ridge Logistics. She ran the name. Amber Ridge had one client, just one, the Trump Organization, and suddenly, it became clear. This was not a passive trust fund. This was a laundering engine. She looked up at Marcus, who was reviewing the same file. "Pull every Amber Ridge transaction. I want the names of every facility, every date, every dollar. If they've done this once, they've done it 100 times. You think there are more? I think we've barely started." By sunrise, Jasmine Crockett had proof that Amber Ridge Logistics was not a logistics company at all. It was a shell, a digital hallway connecting shadow accounts. It handled no cargo, owned no trucks, and listed a non-existent warehouse in Brussels as its headquarters. But what it did handle was money, a lot of it, and nearly every transfer originated from programs designed for soldiers. Crockett stood over a whiteboard in her office as Marcus finished sketching the map. 13 different federal funding programs, all tied to Amber Ridge, all showing clear evidence of diversion. Each name once printed on a congressional budget line, now tangled with a hidden estate or foreign holding. She stared at the center of the board. One line connected everything: Barron Trust. She turned to Marcus. "Do we have enough for a direct criminal referral?" "Yes," he said, "but it won't matter until we get the Justice Department to move." "They'll move," she said, "or we'll make them wish they had." She took the board file and walked back into the hearing room. This time, no witnesses, no cross-examinations, just evidence. And her voice? She began slowly. "Committee members, citizens watching at home, today's hearing is not about political theater. It is about the deliberate sabotage of public trust. And the people behind that sabotage wore suits, not ski masks." She turned to the screen. A new timeline appeared. Amber Ridge payments. Over 3 years. 32 transfers. Every one of them masked under generic line items like consulting, logistics, or risk support. But she added a new layer. The emails. They began with vague language. "Please process next phase. Routing approved through discretion. Ensure identities remain off record." But then they grew bolder. From Eric Trump, March 3rd. "Once the stairwell is complete, reroute anything left from the Valor line. We'll use it for finishing the lower spa level." From an assistant at Trump Financial Holdings. "Barron wants the second floor mirrored like the Bucharest design. Pull from medical if we have to. There's cushion." Crockett turned back to the room. "There's cushion," she repeated. "That's how they talked about your taxes, your contributions, your service. There's cushion." She did not yell. She barely raised her voice. But the silence in the room thickened with every word. Then she dropped the number. Total amount redirected through Amber Ridge over a 32-month period, $94 million. A stunned pause. "And that number is still growing." She lifted another letter. "This one," she said, "was written by the widow of Staff Sergeant Alan Wu. He died in a fire 2 months after the family's heating assistance was denied. Their HVAC unit had failed. They could not afford repairs. The program had no money left." She held up the rejection letter next to the invoice from the villa. It was winter. They were freezing. And the same week his application was denied, Barron Trump received hand-delivered Egyptian silk curtains for his estate. Cost $11,000. Someone in the audience gasped. Another cursed under their breath. "This is not about party," Crockett said. "This is about humanity." Her voice lowered. "And the absence of it." By the end of the session, Amber Ridge was trending in every country with a stable internet connection. That night, a former Trump family financial advisor appeared anonymously on a news program. With their voice altered and face obscured, they confirmed the worst. Yes, the boys knew. They knew where the money came from. "I was there when Eric said, 'Don't worry, the veterans don't read balance sheets.'" That quote lit a match. The next day, thousands of veterans filled the National Mall. Wheelchairs, walkers, families holding signs. Some in uniform, some in tears. They were not there to protest. They were there to demand. And Jasmine Crockett walked out to face them. She stepped up to the platform. She did not deliver a speech. She read names. Name after name of those denied assistance while marble pillars were ordered. Names of children who lost parents. Names of soldiers who died waiting for care. The crowd did not chant. They stood in silence. And then, a single voice rang out. It was Jerry Peters. "You're doing it, Congresswoman." He wasn't holding a sign. He was holding Danny's boots. "They're hearing you now." Back inside the Capitol, things moved quickly. Crockett filed a formal criminal referral to the Department of Justice, 94 pages, each one backed with documentation, timestamps, and financial pathways. No speculation, no assumptions, just cold, traceable theft. Then came the final discovery. One line item in the Amber Ridge ledger stood out. Zurich transfer, client, PT family, project, Eastern Wing expansion, value, $7.8 million. PT family, Trump, personal trust. She traced it to a bank in Switzerland, cross-referenced it with another invoice marked aesthetic renovations for residential facility, Salzburg Estate. It was still active. She looked up at Marcus. "They're still building." He blinked. "Even now?" She nodded. "They're still using our money." "They're still building," Crockett repeated. She stared at the bank record printout, Zurich's logo stamped at the top. $7.8 million, wired just 3 weeks ago. The project memo said Eastern Wing expansion, the same wing Emily Cho had mentioned in a throwaway line during her initial testimony, something about a new entertainment lounge and temperature-controlled wine library. They were still spending stolen money, still expanding luxury, while thousands of wounded veterans were navigating broken elevators and unheated homes back in the country they fought for. And now, Jasmine Crockett had what prosecutors call the bridge, a real-time transaction. She immediately contacted the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. "I want a full intercept on the Zurich transaction," she told the official on the line. They hesitated. "Do you have authority for that?" "I have the authority of 94 million stolen dollars and every name tied to it," she said. By afternoon, the transfer was frozen. The Austrian account was locked. The construction halted, and Crockett returned to the committee floor with one sentence. "They finally know we're watching." The news broke like a dam. Photos of the construction site showed workers leaving. A private jet owned by a Barron Trust affiliate was grounded at a Vienna airstrip. The crew, mostly American, had vanished before authorities arrived. But the most powerful blow came next, not from Crockett, but from a veteran. Her name was Lydia Mason, a double amputee, Silver Star recipient. She had applied for advanced neuroprosthetics in 2021. Denied? Too expensive, not essential. She testified next. "Every time I take a bus," she said, "I have to drag myself up with what strength I have left. Because the funding that was supposed to go to my new legs ended up in a chandelier in a house my tax dollars built for the rich." No one breathed. She reached under the table and lifted the old prosthetics she had outgrown. "This is what I'm left with. Rubber and metal, while he's ordering custom flooring." Crockett leaned in gently. "Lydia, I want you to know, we see you, and we will not stop." Lydia nodded, tears running down her cheeks. The chamber erupted in applause. Even those who had tried to remain neutral were now leaning forward, shaken, caught in something larger than politics. And still, there was more. Crockett called her next witness, Robert Henley, former cybersecurity specialist at the Trump Organization. His appearance was voluntary. "Mr. Henley," she began, "you manage secure email environments for Trump family accounts, correct?" "Yes." "Were you instructed to mask communications regarding the Barron Trust?" He nodded. "Yes, they were flagged as ultra-private. I was told to ensure they were never archived, never duplicated, and never seen by legal." Crockett handed him a sheet. "Do you recognize this string of emails?" He studied it, then spoke. "Yes, I saw that thread myself. Can you read it for the record?" He adjusted the microphone. "Sure." Email from Eric Trump to senior advisors. Quote, "Jasmine is digging too fast. If she keeps going, she's going to crack Zurich. Make sure Barron's withdrawal doesn't leave a trail." End quote. The room fell into a stunned quiet. "Mr. Henley," Crockett said, "how recent is this email?" He cleared his throat. 2 weeks ago. Crockett slowly closed the binder in front of her. So as of 2 weeks ago, they were not only aware of this investigation, but actively conspiring to cover the evidence. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Henley. He nodded and stepped back. Outside, the press had given the scandal a new name, the Valor Villa case. Editorials flooded in. Not about policy, but morality. About what it meant when the highest offices of the land turned disability into a source of profit. Crockett walked through the corridors that evening, speaking to no one, just running the math in her head. The numbers never lied. One prosthetic limb for a soldier, $75,000. Cost of a custom chandelier in the Trump Estate's ballroom, $134,000. Crockett reached her office, sat down, and called Marcus. Tell the committee we're reconvening at 9 a.m. sharp. This time we go to the top. To the president? She stared out the window, past the Capitol dome. To the lie that built this whole thing. He was quiet for a moment. What are we charging them with? She didn't hesitate. Conspiracy, fraud, theft of federal funds, intentional obstruction of justice, abuse of executive privilege, laundering, misappropriation, and contempt for every soldier this country ever asked to bleed for it. The night grew dark, but inside Jasmine Crockett's office, the light never went out. The Capitol was full before sunrise. News vans lined Constitution Avenue, foreign journalists broadcasting in languages Crockett didn't recognize. Veterans in full-dress uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with civilians holding candles. Every step Jasmine took through the marble halls felt louder than it had the day before. She wasn't just preparing to confront power now, she was preparing to strip it bare. Inside the chamber, cameras rolled as the hearing opened. This time, there was no question about where it was headed, no confusion about the stakes. Jasmine Crockett sat forward. Our committee is now initiating a vote to recommend direct federal prosecution of Donald Trump, Eric Trump, and Barron Trump for their roles in the misdirection and laundering of over $94 million in federal aid, stolen from veterans, funneled into private estates, and buried beneath foreign trusts. The room went silent. Then, she added, and to any institution or individual who stood by and allowed it to happen, you are not off the hook. Then she called her final live witness, Jerry Peters. He walked in slowly, same gray flannel shirt, same photo of Danny in hand. Mr. Peters, thank you for coming back. He nodded. I've watched every minute of this, he said. I didn't think I would, but I couldn't stop. Because this story, it's not about politics, it's about a promise. He held up Danny's photo. My son believed in this country, not in slogans, not in flags, but in people, in the idea that if you did what you were asked to do, you would not be forgotten, but he was. He turned to face the gallery, and so were thousands of others. Crockett did not interrupt. She let the silence hold. Then he looked at her. You brought him back. Not just his name, but the dignity he lost in the mail. And I hope they hear you, because if they don't, they will hear us. He stepped down, and Crockett spoke again. This isn't just about what was stolen. It's about what we allowed. This happened on our watch. This happened while we were busy watching headlines instead of balance sheets, while we chased spectacle and ignored the slow bleeding of our own integrity. She raised a document. This is a formal letter of referral, filed this morning with the United States Department of Justice. It contains over 300 pages of testimony, evidence, cross-referenced audits, and direct communication logs. It has been signed by 16 bipartisan members of this committee. It names the perpetrators, and it demands accountability. One by one, committee members spoke. I vote yes. I vote yes. I vote yes. Not one dissent. Then Crockett stood, not behind the microphone, but in front of it. No more delays. No more waiting for courts to catch up with courage. No more headlines with no consequences. The American people deserve more than another scandal. They deserve justice. Then she paused. This is not just a legal reckoning, it is a moral one. Outside, a crowd gathered as the vote results went public. Unanimous. Federal referral approved. Protests erupted across the country, not just against the Trump family, but against the system that enabled them agencies that had failed to enforce their own rules, watchdogs that had looked away, auditors who rubber-stamped disaster. In a rare primetime broadcast, President Trump took to a private network to respond. He stood in front of a fireplace, not in the White House but in a private estate, surrounded by gold trim, mirrors, and thick velvet curtains. "This is persecution," he said. "Political revenge. A disgrace. I have done more for veterans than anyone in history. These attacks? They're lies. The woman behind them is a disgrace to this nation. She should be removed." The network cut the feed 30 seconds later. Public pressure had reached a level no one could ignore. By the next morning, Trump family lawyers had entered pre-indictment negotiations, and the FBI served a formal warrant at Barron's Trust's Austrian estate. Footage showed agents walking through ornate hallways. They passed murals of Roman emperors, crystal chandeliers, carvings of eagles. And then, at the end of the East Wing, they reached a room with glass walls and a marble statue in the center. The statue was of a man in military dress. Only it wasn't modeled after anyone real. It was an aesthetic replica, designed for ambiance. That statue had cost $52,000. That image, a fake soldier cast in cold stone, bought with stolen veteran funds, became the symbol of the scandal. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett refused all invitations for interviews. She stayed in the office. Her team worked around the clock preparing for final testimony. Marcus stood in her doorway, holding a fresh audit. "We got new data from the Department of Defense, another $4 million unaccounted for." Crockett turned. "Connected to Amber Ridge?" He nodded. "Pull the files, check them against the Capitol Hill Trust, then call the Inspector General. We are not finished." He paused before leaving. "You're making history, Jasmine." She shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm cleaning up someone else's mess." But even she could feel it now, the shape of something shifting, not just a case, a country, peeling back a mask that had been on too long. And somewhere, tucked away in a folder on her desk, was Danny's letter. She read it again. Make it mean something. The morning of the final hearing began in silence. No press calls, no rallies, no shouts in the hallway, just the low hum of a government building knowing the weight of what it was about to witness. Inside, Jasmine Crockett took her seat, alone at the center of the chamber. In front of her were only two items, a single sealed folder and a photo of Danny Peters, tucked carefully inside her notes. No witnesses were called, no more documents shown on the screen. The evidence had already spoken. Now came the reckoning. She adjusted her microphone and began. "Over the past 6 weeks, this committee has uncovered something more than a crime, more than theft. We have uncovered a betrayal so vast, so calculating, it managed to hide inside the institutions built to prevent it." She paused. "We have traced $94 million from federal aid programs intended for veterans and their families into private accounts, foreign estates, and real estate portfolios tied directly to the Trump family. We have confirmed the roles of over a dozen facilitators. We have declassified communications, proving the knowledge and intent of those involved." She tapped the folder lightly. "And this final report will be entered into the congressional record. Unsealed, unredacted, public, permanent." No one in the chamber moved. "Let me be clear," she said. "This was not an error, not a miscommunication, not a gray area." She leaned forward, voice steady. This was greed. Across town, former President Donald Trump was preparing to leave the country. Flight records later showed a private aircraft filed for clearance into Abu Dhabi airspace, under a holding company connected to Barron's Trust. But the flight never took off. Agents served a travel block 30 minutes before wheels up. Back in the Capitol, the report was read aloud. Not by Crockett, but by a staff clerk, page by page, word for word. It listed every invoice, every redirect, every shadow firm and shell payment. Amber Ridge Logistics was confirmed as the operational laundering core, Monarch Europe as its gateway, Apex Liberty as its anchor. It concluded with a set of names: Donald John Trump, Eric Frederick Trump, Barron William Trump, Paul Greer, Melinda Hawthorne, Brand Halverson, 3 former VA liaisons, 2 members of the Executive Budget Office, and 1 foreign intermediary still under investigation. Crockett watched from her seat. She did not look away. Not when Barron's signature appeared on the maintenance contract. Not when Lydia Mason's name came up again, tagged under denied funding in the medical registry. And when the final sentence was read, the room held its breath. The undersigned committee hereby refers all named parties for criminal prosecution and permanent disqualification from holding or managing any federal public funds now or in the future. The silence that followed was not quiet. It roared. Moments later, the Speaker of the House entered the chamber. He walked directly to Crockett, reached for the folder, and said simply, "Well done." But she didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the press cameras and spoke one last time. To every soldier who's been forgotten, overlooked, underfunded, disrespected, this belongs to you. Outside, the crowd was gathering again. Veterans wept. Families held photos. A woman waved a banner that read, "Service is not a price tag." And somewhere, in a room now sealed by federal agents, the Austrian villa sat quiet. Lights off, workers gone, curtains still drawn over windows that once faced million-dollar gardens built from stolen dreams. That night, Jasmine Crockett did something she had not done in weeks. She went home. She sat in her small kitchen, poured herself coffee, and pulled out the envelope Jerry Peters had first handed her. Inside was something she hadn't noticed. A second letter. It was from Danny, written months before the first one. This one was hopeful. Still a little angry, but full of fight. "I believe someone's going to care enough to look. If they ever do, tell them not to stop at me. Tell them to look for all of us. We're still here. We're still waiting." Crockett folded the page slowly. Then she picked up her phone. "Marcus?" "Yeah, boss?" "We're not done. Not until every single program is rebuilt from the ground up." There was a pause. He sighed, but it wasn't tired. It was proud. "I figured you'd say that." The committee chamber sat empty now. The nameplates had been removed, the lights dimmed, the last camera shut down. But what had happened inside those walls would not fade quietly. Outside, it was no longer just protest signs. It was legislation. Senators who once hesitated to speak now echoed Jasmine Crockett's language in every interview. Governors released audits of their own state veteran program. Military families demanded full disclosure of where every federal dollar had gone. And inside the Department of Justice, a new file sat on the director's desk. It contained the formal indictment requests for Donald Trump, Eric Trump, and Barron Trump, no longer shielded by office, no longer protected by secrecy. It was not a conviction, not yet, but it was the start of one. And across the country, something had shifted. This was not just a political scandal anymore. It had become a question everyone was being forced to answer. What do we owe those who served? And what happens when we steal from them? Jasmine Crockett walked slowly through the Capitol that afternoon, past the statues of men who'd fought in older wars, past the faded portraits of lawmakers long forgotten. She paused by the memorial wall, where the names of Medal of Honor recipients were etched in brass. She read the same one she always did, Danny Peters. He had not received that medal, but in her heart, he had earned it twice over. She stepped outside into the cool air. Reporters waited, crowds parted. But instead of a press conference, she gave them something else. She walked down the steps and stood in the middle of the crowd. And then she handed Jerry Peters something she had kept in her coat pocket for weeks. It was a copy of the final report, bound in black, heavy in weight. Jerry took it with both hands. "Thank you," he said. She nodded. "He wasn't invisible." "No," Jerry said. "He's the reason they can't look away anymore." News anchors tried to find ways to summarize it. Some called it the largest federal misappropriation of veteran funds in modern history. Others described it as the day a congresswoman dismantled a dynasty. But to those watching online, to the soldiers at home and abroad, it became something else entirely. Proof. Proof that people were still watching, still fighting, still listening. And Jasmine Crockett, the woman they once called a background name in the House, had changed everything with nothing but a binder, a voice, and the will not to stop. That evening, she issued her final statement before Congress recessed. It was not a speech, just a sentence. Privilege without accountability is not strength, it is rot. And then she left the floor. The Trump family remained silent for the next 48 hours. Their lawyers scrambled. Bail conditions were negotiated behind closed doors. But the world kept turning. And so did the veterans who had waited too long to be heard. They marched that night, candles in one hand, photos in the other. From Capitol Hill to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, hundreds of them. No slogans, just names. One after another. Names that mattered. Because someone finally said they did. If you made it this far, you know this story isn't just about a hearing, or a headline, or a scandal. It's about truth, and what it costs to bring it to light. So if you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and tell me in the comments. Do you believe justice is finally catching up with power, or is this just the beginning? Your voice matters too. Thanks for watching.